a black panther, ants that can escape their habitat, along with creatures that were brought back from the dead. And it's all happening on today's episode of Zoo Tours. Welcome back to Zoo Tours, where we trek wildlife parks one exhibit at a time and discover the incredible animals that call our planet home. If this is your very first tour, I would really appreciate it if you press those like and sub buttons to officially join our group, or click the join button that lets you vote on what we see next. For today's adventure, we are flying across the Atlantic to France, where their amazing Paris Zoo lets you explore 5 wild zones without ever having to leave the city. But there's one that really stands out from the others, and it represents life in Guyana. Guyana is a country located on the northern edge of South America. 85% of it is a rainforest and a refuge to tens of thousands of different species. Although the exhibit in Paris isn't just limited to Guyana, but it also features creatures from the Amazon all the way up to Mexico. According to the map, we will start right here. And our very first animal of the day is one of the most special species you could ever see, the Chacoan peccary. If you're thinking, oh cool, an unusual looking pig, I would not blame you, but it's actually not a pig. They are about the same size of them, they have the tusks, stubby legs, and even the snouts. But peccaries and pigs live in their own scientific families. There are 3 species of peccaries, but the Chacoan is definitely the rarest of them all. For quite some time, scientists only knew them from fossils and thought they were extinct until they were properly discovered and described in 1971. This is what scientists call a Lazarus species, when a plant or animal is declared extinct, but then discovered later on to be alive. They found them hanging out near the middle of South America. However, because they have such a small range, they are more vulnerable to habitat loss and hunting, and their population is only around 3,000 individuals, and they are classified as an endangered species. Guyana's second animal also has a very exotic look, and are only in a handful of zoos back where I'm from. So for the first time on Zoo Tours, I get to present the bush dog. They are short, have the face of a bear cub. They look like a loaf of bread with legs, and are the only surviving member of their genus. But they are wild canines, and evidence suggests they are closely related to Maine wolves and African painted dogs, both ironically very tall canines. The bush dog's petite stature actually helps them move through tough-to-walk in parts of the forest, and stalk their prey without being noticed. Like most other canines, they live in packs and team up to hunt armadillos, agoutis, and even capybaras. They have super thick fur and partially webbed feet which they use to swim, and swim very well. Now it turns out the bush dog is also a Lazarus species, but sort of in a different way. In the mid-1800s, a paleontologist discovered bush dog fossils in a cave and believed it was from an extinct species, until that same paleontologist found a living population of bush dogs later on. Although some sources say he didn't immediately realize that the fossils he found and the living dogs were the same species. A porky mammal that's not a pig, and a jungle loaf, 2 species that we've never seen on the channel before. Now how about we get to a South American classic? It is always a pleasure to be in the presence of jaguars. You've heard of them, you've probably seen one before, but did you know that jaguars have the strongest bite of any cat? Their bite force is over 10 times more powerful than ours. Now I know you've definitely heard of a black panther, but chances are a majority of you haven't seen one before. Well, if you go to Paris, you can. They are not a different species. They just have a genetic twist called melanism, which is the opposite of a creature that's albino, and it means their fur is packed with extra dark pigment, giving them this striking appearance. But with just the right amount of sunlight, you can see that black jaguars, and also black leopards, still have their spots. So you've just come across a jungle cat in night mode, but for the 4th time in a row, things are gonna get even weirder. Next, we have 2 more mammals. One that looks like it has a snorkel, and the other is like the most chill potato in the animal kingdom. Capybaras, the guinea pig's giant look-alike cousin, is the biggest rodent on Earth. They can weigh over 140 pounds. They're built for life on land and the water, and as I'm hoping you all know, they are super social. In Paris, they are kind enough to share their territory with this. If you're at a zoo and you hear someone say, "Hey, look, an elephant," an anteater, how about a tapir? Tapirs are large vegetarians with flexible snouts to help them grab leaves and sniff out food. I guess, yeah, it kind of looks like they have an elephant's trunk, but the family tree does say that tapirs are more closely related to horses and rhinos. On our previous tours, we have seen the Baird's tapir, the very rare mountain tapir from the Andes, the more popular bicolor species from Southeast Asia, and with this feature of the South American or Brazilian species, I believe this officially marks the moment we've now met all 4 recognized tapirs on zoo tours. Before we meet our next jungle buddy, I wanted to point out just how good and consistent the Paris Zoo is with the quality of their homes. Like this one. It's big, tall, there's climbing opportunities everywhere. Perfect for the woolly monkey. Not just another rarity, but another zoo tour's first. Woolly monkeys are so good at climbing. I found that they can zip through the forest at 35 miles per hour. Even with that belly, all that fur, and being one of the heaviest monkeys in South America, they still have a strong prehensile tail that acts like a 5th limb to help them out. Clearly, being related to spider monkeys and howler monkeys definitely has its benefits. Their hair might not be longer than some primates, but it is a lot more dense. You might ask, why would they need such a thick sweater in this environment? Well, it not only protects them from the sun, but some sources say it acts like insulation against damp and cool conditions in certain parts of where they are from. As you saw, some primates are given enclosed spaces, while the next 2 live on their very own islands. Both spaces have their benefits, but I want to know which one you prefer to see. I personally prefer large islands like this, so we can get clear views of animals like the tufted capuchin, coincidentally another monkey defined by their dew. The other islander is so relatively isolated, I wouldn't be surprised if people pass them without even noticing, because the marmosets are so small. Now, how small are we talking? Well, small and far enough to almost be out of reach of my friend's zoom lens. Since you and I are not physically here, I can't really compare them to anything for scale. But I can tell you that white-headed marmosets are generally less than a pound and can be 2 feet long, but that's also if you include their tail. I know some of you are probably dying to see what's inside that giant glass building. But I would feel bad if I didn't give a shout out to the vibrancy of the Hyacinth Macaw. Personally, my favorite of the 19 macaw species. Hyacinths are the longest parrot in the world, stretching over 3 feet from head to tail. Their beaks are strong enough to open coconuts and even macadamia nuts, which are some of the toughest in the world to crack. But usually can't crack open one of their favorites, the Peccary palm nut, until it's been eaten and digested by a cow. Alright folks, now we can look to see what's inside this greenhouse. It's about 109 meters long, 24 meters tall, and so immersive, it makes it feel like you never even left the outdoors. You could come across over 80 different species, some that can even walk the trail with us, and some that aren't even from South America, because Guyana actually shares this atrium with part of their Madagascar exhibit that starts near the end of the path. Now, since I walk through one attraction at a time, it won't be covered on today's video, and also because I already made an episode of it. So here's a card in the corner when you're ready. Back to South America. The first habitat inside the atrium will have you seeing double, because it's actually the indoor space for the macaws, and apparently an equally beautiful yellow-knobbed Curassow. Of those 80 species, about 20 of them are slithering reptiles, slimy amphibians, and incredible invertebrates. And most of the terrariums were designed with the same level of care and detail that we've seen so far. We won't get to all of them, but I will cover the ones that I think are the wildest. Or in reality, the ones that my friend Mark was able to film the longest. Like the golden tegu, one of the coolest looking lizards around. They have a glossy surface, powerful limbs, thick tail, and because of their striking pattern, in some regions they're known as the tiger lizard. Green vine snakes really live up to their name. They're fairly long but really skinny and have binocular vision, which helps them hide in trees and sneak up on other lizards and frogs. It is mildly venomous, but fortunately for us, it is not dangerous to humans. Another great thing about Paris is they exhibit certain animals in open-topped environments that other zoos wouldn't, at least compared to some zoos that I've been to in the States. This isn't an uncommon practice for the river stingrays below, but it is for many species of iguanas. Speaking of the US, green iguanas are famously a well-known part of Florida's wildlife scene. Or I should say infamously, because they are famously invasive not just in Florida. They were introduced to Hawaii, Texas, Thailand, and a lot more. Their true native range extends from southern Mexico to nearly half of South America, including Guyana. Going back to the open top discussion, this is my favorite display because it looks like it's hundreds of thousands, probably millions of residents can escape at any moment. Ants. Not just any ant, the leafcutter ant. It doesn't look very green at the moment, but I'll still just talk about what they're famous for. Leafcutter ants don't actually consume leaves. They chop them up with their scissor-like jaws and carry them overhead like bodybuilders. Then they take the pieces underground to grow a special fungus, and that's their real food. Now, when I said it looks like they can escape at any moment, there's actually a sign that reads, "Some scout ants managed to cross the water barrier, but don't worry, the keepers have taken necessary measures. However, don't try to catch them because you might get bitten." Did you guys miss the monkeys? I missed the monkeys, which is why I'm excited to show you the six-banded armadillo, who lives with bearded socky monkeys. I don't need to tell you what they're named after, but I can say that I am very jealous. It might take 80 years for me to grow a beard like that, and I'm not exaggerating, sadly. Even the females have them. Family groups live high in the trees and really prefer to keep it that way. They communicate with whistles and chirps, but if danger is around and need to stay silent, they will talk to each other by wagging their tails. On the subject of danger, these waters are guarded by the bold, beautiful, and mighty caiman. Dwarf caimans, to be specific. Their average length is about 4.5 to 5 feet, which means they are fun-sized. You don't really expect crocodilians to be that small, but they still can be just as aggressive as their larger cousins. Dwarf caimans live in fast-moving rivers and rocky creeks, where they snack on fish, insects, and jaguars are not alone in the sense that something as small as a dwarf caiman can also crush the shell of a turtle. If you are not lucky enough to catch a feeding frenzy of feathers from our good friends, the scarlet ibises and roseate spoonbills here, not flamingos by the way, just wanted to clarify that, then your next move will be towards what I think we can all agree is the attraction's crown jewel, the magnificent habitat for caiman lizards, which just happens to be directly across from the manatee habitat. As a tour group, we've had the privilege of watching these graceful sea cows several times from several different zoos in the United States and even at the Burger Zoo in the Netherlands. But we're used to the Florida manatee. These are Antillean manatees, and both are subspecies of the West Indian manatee. The gentle giants from Florida live along the shores of the southeastern US. Antilleans have a much wider range, covering the Caribbean to the shores of Mexico and northeast waters of South America. When it comes to manatees, zoos in the US and Europe operate a little differently from each other. Most, if not then all sea cows in zoos that are in the US are rescues, and a lot of them will be rehabbed and released. But since zoos across the pond are literally too far away to do any rescuing themselves, zoos in Europe manage breeding populations to ensure long-term survival and human care. because the West Indian manatee is a threatened species. Now over here we have another amazing, well-furnished, well-detailed setup. And the animals that get to enjoy this is a wild mix of mammals. The coppery or red titi, another gorgeous fluffy monkey. I mean, look at them, their fur makes them look like they're rusting. Now in Paris, they do share this space with pied tamarins, two-toed sloth, and white-faced saki monkeys. And I'd love to talk about them, but they will also make an appearance in next week's adventure. Now that I think about it, quite a few other specimens in this attraction will be in that next episode as well, or at least make a cameo. And that includes the giant anteater. Last time we met this unbelievable looking oddball, we learned about their snout and their eating habits. Now I want to talk about how chill anteaters are, and not in the way that, capybaras are. Even though they eat thousands of ants and termites a day, it doesn't really give them the energy that they need. So they have a slow metabolism and are pretty much on energy saving mode 24/7. They sleep up to 15 hours a day, they're fairly slow moving, and have internal temps of 33 degrees Celsius, which is one of the lowest body temperatures of any mammal. Alright folks, you almost made it. Our last animal. They have bright colors, the personality, and are a great way to end our tour. Toko toucans can be described as, well, almost all toucans can be described as borderline beaks with wings. But it's not weighing them down. It's mostly hollow. Continuing our talk on body temperature, they use it like a built-in air conditioner. Let me put it this way. When the toucan gets too hot in the rainforest, it can send its body heat to its beak, kind of like turning on a fan or rolling down a window. Blood will flow to its beak, and since it's really thin, the heat can escape into the air and cool this bird down. So, which animal or which habitat stood out to you the most, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments so we can chat about it. And if you learned something or this episode gave you something to smile about, go ahead and please hit that like button. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode, stay wild, and thank you all for watching Zoo Tours.